It is 5:30 PM, and the Planning and Zoning Commission for Thursday, June 24th, 2021 is now in session. Would you all please, let's stand for the invocation. 2021 is now in session. Would you all please, let's stand for the invocation. 2021 is now in session. Would you all please, let's stand for the invocation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address this commission or have remarks or questions on any item that is not a part of our tonight's agenda? Anything that's not on the agenda for this evening? Anybody have anything for us tonight? Anything that's not on the agenda for this evening? Then, item number 4 is the adoption of the last meeting's minutes. Commissioners, do we have any questions or discussion about the minutes for last month? Do we have any questions or discussion about the minutes? No one? Last month. All right, do I hear a motion? All right, I have a motion to approve last month's meeting minutes. That's a mouthful. Do we hear a second?
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, like sign. All right, this has carried. Item number 5 is to, excuse me just a moment. Discuss the appointment of the chairman and the vice chairman, P&Z Commission meeting members. I don't know what that's about, Mr. Charles, so I assume this was done last month.
No, sir, we did it last month.
Okay.
So we've had some recent appointments, and so now is the time, and some reappointments, and so now is the time to select a chairman. You can make that in one motion to select a chairman and a vice chairman, or you can make a motion to select a chairman, vote on it, and then select a vice chairman. It's however you wish.
Okay. So let's, so as far as a chairman, we'll put this on the ballot. So you're welcome to recommend or make a motion for whoever you want to be chairman for the coming term. Is it for 3 years?
Yes, sir.
3 years. So, is there any discussion? Anybody want to mention anything or have something to say about what your recommendation would be, or would you just like to make a motion for chairman of the Planning and Zoning Board? Don't be bashful. Somebody got to speak up. Okay, I have a motion for me to be the chairman, and I don't know when my term ends for sure. I'm not sure if it's 3 years, but it's pretty close to that, I think. And for Jenny Heisel to be the vice chair. So I have the motion. Do I hear a second? I have a second. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, like sign. All right, that is carried. Are you up for it? Okay. All right, we'll try to do that then. All right, item number 5.2 is to discuss and consider a construction plat for Rogers and Clark addition being 5.07 acres out of the John C. Hale survey, abstract number 202, the city of Terrell, Kaufman County, Texas. Mr. Fenner, can you help us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Before you on page 14, page 11, this is just a construction plat of 5 acres that just runs off of 148 The ideal thing, piece of use of this property is to have some future construction of buildings. It's part of a larger tract out there. You may know where the Oak Creek Cemetery is. There's Rise Anchor, that and so forth, and it's in this area. So it's just a construction plat, and so what they do is they submit the actual construction plat with the documents. There's mostly public improvements out there. As you know, we've had TxDOT programs out there in the city and the partnerships and the widening of all that and the utilities. So there won't be much to do on that property other than drainage and so forth. So at this point, you would just approve the construction plat as submitted. The next steps would be for the applicant to complete the public improvements that are required, and then that will be inspected and approved by the city engineer, and at which time they would submit a final plat for approval, and then that would become a lot of record. So it would be recorded, and they would have full ownership of it. The optional piece of number 4 is just like anything else. For public improvements, they have the opportunity to do a letter of credit or surety bond in lieu of public improvements. And they can go ahead and submit the final plat if they want to purchase the property immediately. And that letter of credit or surety bond has to be based on engineering estimates from their contractor that's approved by our engineer and signed and approved by council to allow them to do that so they can get that final plat done. And if they so choose that, once the improvements are inspected and signed off on, the letter of credit or surety bond is released. And normally this happens in a bigger subdivision, as we've seen before, in bigger subdivisions where we have crossroads or some other things that are happening, that there's some off-site improvements and there's some things that need to be done. There's some drainage, or it's just a vacant piece of track and they have to do some major drainage, some sidewalks, and some water and sewer extensions. And so instead of doing those things all up front, they have the option to do the letter of credit. In this case, I don't see that happening. I just see them getting a construction plat, building any public improvements they may need to have, and be signed off by the engineering department, and then we'll see a final plat for approval. Everything's good. Staff recommends approval of the plat.
Okay. Any questions for city staff tonight concerning this item? All right, no questions. I would entertain a motion. I have a motion that we recommend to City Council approval of this item number 5.2. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. And that also has carried. All right, we're moving on now to item number 5.3. To conduct a public hearing to discuss and consider a zone change from highway corridor to commercial to allow a new building for the office and truck maintenance shop on 3.114 acres out of the Thomas F. Smith Survey, abstract number 493, the city of Terrell, Kaufman County, Texas, also known as 12147 FM 1392, Terrell, Texas. Mr. Finner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The current zoning of the property is highway corridor. It's delineated on the map. The applicant has requested commercial zoning, which would allow the structure on the property to be used as truck maintenance shop. However, in addition to that, there would have to be an SUP on top of the use, and so that would have to come back if the commission so chooses to make a recommendation to change the zoning. You'll see on the map that this is an area that we had annexed some time ago. There is Highway 80 on the south. It's surrounded by the ETJ on the north and highway corridor zoning right now. 9 letters were sent out. No letters have been sent back in favor of or against. Excuse me. As you all know, we've talked several times about highway corridor being probably our top-notch zoning district because it has several attributes of planning opportunities within developing your own shopping center, creating form-based type shopping centers, creating streetscapes, aesthetics, double facades. In other words, you can kind of see buildings in a square and you can see 2 uses on each side and so forth. And that was the intent of creating the highway corridor. We haven't had too much development in the highway corridor. Most of our stuff has been PD. We do like the highway corridor, and there is also a lot more future land use described in our highway corridor, described in our future land use for the future. The highway corridor also creates the articulate designs of the area, and it's a mixture of retail, office, and some commercial that are closer to some highway areas. In this case, the commercial zoning of the property allows for a number of different uses. So in commercial, we always got to look at what we're rezoning to. And if we're rezoning from highway corridor to commercial, we're going to a much heavier use and to a use that has specific requirements and not really form-based or architecturally sound standards. It deals more so with the use. And again, in a commercial use, you still have to have an SUP to allow that to happen. Rezoning the property to commercial will not be following the comprehensive plan. The highway corridor is currently the best zoning for this property, and the future land use designation of light commercial and retail office have attributes of the highway corridor zoning. So in our comprehensive plan, we have a split between light retail and office and commercial zoning, highway corridor zoning, and we do not have any commercial zoning in that area for the future land use for it to be rezoned, and therefore the staff recommends denial of the request.
All right, Commissioners, any discussion about this? This is a quiet bunch tonight.
It is.
All right, no discussion, no questions for Mr. Fenner?
Off 1392, just west 80. If you look on the map, you can see you're getting close to the west side of where Spur 557 goes up. 1392 goes straight up north and south of this property, and this particular property, I believe, is about 1,000 foot from the Highway 80 portion. So it's far west of the city on East 80, on West 80. There is a subdivision that was built a long time ago, just a little subdivision down there to the right off 80 when it was out of the city. But again, that was annexed about 3 years ago. And that's the location that you'll have. And you can see down south, there's a lot of the business park, industrial use, and so forth. There are, in some of those areas, there's a car lot down the road, and I'm not sure what else there are. I know there's some trailers and some other things that are around in that area.
And this, the comprehensive plan does not call for commercial type zoning over there?
No, sir. The actual, which is a unique situation in our comp plan, because this is one of the only areas that it really calls for local office and retail, which, as y'all know, local office and retail are less intense use than commercial and anyhow. And so they create a retail office use mix in that zoning category. But in our comp plan, the way we had done our comp plan, if you remember, and it's been a while, that there are the attributes of the highway corridor piece that can transition into local office and retail. But there are no commercial attributes that transition into the local office and retail mix.
Any other questions or discussion? In just a moment, yes.
Yeah,
You'll have an opportunity here in just a moment.
Mr. Fenner, can a special use permit be applied for and issued without changing the zoning?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No, ma'am. Highway corridor just doesn't allow that. So again, if it were rezoned to commercial, then the second step, it would have to go to council and get approved, and the second step, there'd be basically a public hearing process for a zone change to get that overlay of SUP.
Any other questions, discussion? All right, then I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone here in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this request? Please come forward. State your name, Mr. Oates, so we'll know who you are.
My name is Denny Oates, those that don't know me, and I actually sold this gentleman this piece of property, and this is kind of a no man's land out there because basically everything around this is shut down. There's a body shop over on the north side of this property. Matter of fact, the city of Terrell, when it annexed, it actually went through the middle of the body shop, so paint and body. So that thing's gonna be there, I guess, from now on. The other two pieces of property that actually are on Highway 80 are shut down. There's not enough. There's really not enough property there to do anything with as far as this corridor, and so. Like I say, everything around it's shut down. So there's a rent house across the street. There's a lumber yard that's been shut down. So I don't see high retail coming in to this area at all. And so if any of y'all's been out there, you'll know what this thing looks like. I mean, it's pretty sad. to put it bluntly. And Steve Rogers had told me that they're supposed to run an overpass, but it'll be actually to the east of this intersection, which I think is going to end up killing that whole intersection right there at some point. And so I just don't see, I don't know exactly high retail, I don't know if that's Target or whatever, but of course we're only looking at 3 acres and everything around it's landlocked. And so that's basically, what it boils down to. So if high retail gets there, it's probably not going to be in my lifetime. So,
All right, sir.
I mean, anybody got any questions or anything they need?
Any questions for Denny?
The piece of the building that he's wanting to put on this property is in the northwest corner, which will be the furthest from 1392 and furthest away from Highway 80. So basically, in other words, I guess air compressors or whatever he ends up doing on this, it should be minimum impact on anybody around it. So it's one of those things. So I know nobody responded to the letter, so it tells you something. So anyway. All right. I appreciate y'all's time. Thanks.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this request? All right. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in opposition to the approval of this request? No? Then I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, discussion, please. or questions? No discussion?
This is designated as highway court, right?
Right now, it is, yes, sir, it is.
And I know there was some talk about trying to recruit some kind of businesses in that area. Has there been any update on that?
I don't know, I don't know the answer to that question.
No, I was just, I thought at one point they were talking about they were looking to put get some kind of, some form of businesses or something along that area. I know the area he's talking about, there used to be like a, for lack of a better word, junk shop out there. There was another car repair place, if I'm not mistaken, just a little west of there. And then as you go down, there was the old racetrack.
Right,
station.
right.
So right now, it's a blank.
Correct, agree, and point well taken by Mr. Oates. We talked in the comp plan, and I think that's why we had the mixed-use local office retail, because that brings in, if you look at the zoning districts, you can see the difference in what they're looking for. They're not necessarily looking for the big box developments. They're looking for a containable type development that's close to a road, and so that can be its own setup. Could be a village center, even highway corridor has attributes of a town centerpiece that you can create. So the idea of highway corridor is not necessarily the big box situation, but it is a development of several buildings intact and that are in one area sustainable for itself. There has been conversation, and you were very involved, and I know you quoted some stuff back a few weeks ago on the comp plan. Some of those implementation programs that we're looking at, we all need to look at Highway 80, east and west, and rezoning Highway 80 east and west to grab business is not the ideal situation, but to try to create a corridor overlay or something that can bring in some business that could be not just focused on business, but can focus on compatibility with surrounding things. You take a convenience store that didn't survive, you take some other things, the junkyards, you take little things like that, and we would want to try to create something that's going to create an economical type commerce piece for the city. And one of the ways to do that, and one of the ways we talked about that in the comp plan, was to create a corridor overlay. So at some point, some less intense uses, maybe quick lubes and things like that, could be involved in some of these zonings, but they would be involved in a way they were designed appropriately. So that may be what you're talking about as far as looking for business.
Right. Any other questions? If not, then I will entertain a motion concerning this request, item number 5.3.
I motion at this time to deny the rezoning of highway carrier to commercial.
All right.
From 1392 Lot 1, Block A.
Okay. I have a motion, recommend to City Council denial of this request. Do I hear a second? I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Let's raise our hands, please. All in favor, raise hands. All opposed, like sign. Okay, I believe the denial has passed. All right. Item number 5.4. This is to conduct a public hearing to to discuss and consider a zone change from retail to planned development, multifamily, to allow construction of 300-unit multifamily development on 11.451 acres out of the John C. Hale Survey, abstract number A-202, the City of Terrell, Kaufman County, Texas, also known as Crosswords Parkway, Terrell, Texas. Charles, help us, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. As you know, there's apartment complex being built that we approved through SUP process a couple years ago. As on the plan and for the future use of this property, there were going to be some hotels. Apartments. We did change some of the zoning. At one point, we had apartments allowed in the retail area through SUP. We don't have that anymore, simply because we had a lot of retail around and we weren't targeting hotels. Apartments. But in this area, we knew that was going to have to be what was going on, because we were looking at several different aspects of the mixed-use development with several needs that make up that mixed-use development, live and kind of work and do things that you can do, and we're still not done there, or the developer's still not done. So the applicant submitted a plan development for 11.4 acres of land for 3B. This property is located at Crossroads. PD is creating a new PDMF. The underlying zoning will still remain retail. However, the plan development overlay ordinance will have certain conditions attached to the property. Anything not addressed in that overlay as a condition will revert back to the retail zoning. So a few conditions of the PD proposed by the applicant are as such. We have the development of the height and regulations that we've worked through in our plan development ordinance. There are nice entryways that we've had to upgrade. There's some landscaping standards that are upgraded, the minimum exterior standards, and then the square footage have been upgraded. I want to say one thing about the apartment complex is we are getting bombarded by weekly, daily, by apartments, and right now that's the hottest commodity. That cap rates are good, sales are good, and when you have a great product like these guys have done out there, I don't know if you've been able to tour, but this is a resort style type of development, and they've done everything they said they were going to do. And there's a lot of options for recreation and just being outside and being part of this around there. When we started doing things, my complaint on apartments were our rental community is so high here. We have so many landlords that own homes, and we have such a high rental market rate that creates a really bad market valuation for me studying for new homes and affordable homes. And that's not apartments that we have, that's houses. We see an average home that's fallen apart for people renting for $1,300. That's crazy. And our job is not to take over what people are making. Our job is to protect both sides and people living. We've had areas where police have been called, fire been called, where people have fallen through the floor and things like that. There's dirt floors and stuff like that. And that's just something that has happened over the past years with the way we've developed here. And so there is a need to upgrade. There is a need to get better. Crossroads was an opportunity back in the day when we had all the partnerships that this had to occur. And so I will say that when I was first sitting down, I think the first words out of my mouth to these guys were, hey, I want above market rate. I want, if you're going to be a transitional apartment complex where people can come home, do everything they need to, and then drive away, I want a transition rate. Well, then a higher market rate, well, it got to, well, this is going to be a home, for people. And And they've made it that way, but they've not only done that, they've exceeded everything that we could possibly think. And their market rate, their rent rates are extremely, very competitive to those of many places around Richardson and Plano and Frisco. There's, I think they're probably to the limit, and we knew that this was going to come through. And so at this point, we were wanting to work with them. We said, hey, we want something different on this complex. And part of that is to have some kind of live-work piece, because there's so many people living and working from home. And so one of the additional things that we got were the 4 products of the offices located in each residential units. There's a total of about 1,300 square feet of live work. There's a separate parking for these guys and so forth. And I think that's going to probably blossom into a lot of things, not to mention what's going to happen with the pond and what we've done with the rest of Crossroads that you guys don't see, that we're working with the rest of Crossroads to do to make that a really nice development. So we recommend the approval of this apartment complex under the PD and under the stipulations that we have in the development standards. We feel they'll meet them, and not only meet them, that we feel that they'll very much exceed them. These are not the kind of people I'm talking to that I believe that when they meet the standards, that's enough. When they meet the standards, I think they go above and beyond. If the council so chooses to chooses to approve this, the next part of this will be submission of a construction plat that conforms with this plan development, the development standards. Things will be built, just like I said before. They'll either build them, they'll build these improvements, have them approved and signed off by the engineer, or they'll put up a letter of credit in lieu of those public improvements so they can get the final plat in here and start start building and renting these apartment complex units. Staff sent out 3 letters, nothing came back, and so staff recommends the approval of the proposed development, plan development multifamily on the 11.45 acres for Crossroads Terrell at 3B.
All right. Commissioner, do we have questions for Mr. Fenner concerning this request? Any comments, discussion? I would like to say one thing. It's a little refreshing, honestly, to hear of someone who considers building standards not the maximum, but the minimum amount, and then willing to do a little more.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate it, gentlemen,
Yeah.
whoever that is. All right, so that's it. Do we have a motion? Can I entertain a motion?
You want to open the public hearing?
Oh, sorry. Yes, we will. We will open the public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak in favor of this at this time? Please come forward.
Madam Vice Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. I'm going to be careful. My name is Rob McConnell. I'm the developer of Phase 1 and developer of Phase 2 also. Appreciate the comments. I don't want to say too much because it sounds like planning staff is for it, so I don't want to screw that up. But my main purpose to come up is to support it. I have a vested interest, obviously, but to answer maybe any questions that you might have, or if you are interested, I can give you just a quick 2-minute overview of what the difference is going to be in Phase 2 from Phase 1. But I don't want to waste anyone's time, certainly.
No, we'd like to hear that.
Okay, well, I'll first say that when we first came to Terrell and looked at developing Phase 1, I was a little bit shocked by the standards because they were very high. The more I looked at the community, it made a lot of sense to us to not only meet those, but as Mr. Fenner mentioned, to exceed those, because what we try to do is to develop and deliver what tenants want, and that makes them move there, and then to keep up that quality, it just makes sense. It's a win-win for everyone. So I appreciate your comments as well. My partner and I try to deliver a product that we're proud of, and that where we would live, and that we never have to worry about going forward. So on this second project, we're going to do something, and I think maybe you have the site plan up there, which is not colored. This might give you a little extra flavor, and I'll just kind of hold this up here. If you want to see it, I can leave it or whatever. But we've had a ton of success in phase one. In fact, last month, we leased 50 units. And if you're not an apartment person, 25 units in the city of Dallas is a very successful lease-up. So to do 50 units in this community is just, it's part of the community, it's part of our product. But what we decided to do on phase two, and you guys really are driving this portion, is the live-work units that Mr. Fenner had mentioned. You know, with this COVID, and I think even before that, you know, folks and companies are moving to a model where you can work from home, or if you're a business, to have it close by. It makes it even more of a community. So we're proposing to deliver the 4 live-work units, which will be up front on Crossroads Parkway. This is a rendering of a retail sample of kind of the live-play model, where you know, you can live up on top and then have the retail below. We're not doing the retail, certainly, but I wanted to kind of show you what that might look like. And the business storefronts would have their signage that's, you know, within the requirements of the city, but, you know, they would have their storefronts in front of their unit. And essentially, whether it's an insurance agent or an accountant or whatever the small business owner is, would have their clients come in to their home, but it would be a distinct office space. I don't know if you have that slide with the floor plan. This is kind of what we're thinking. The very top is the entrance that would face on a Crossroads Parkway. We'd have some dedicated parking up there, parallel to the road. The clients could come in. You see the office space there, enter. It would be like an office, separated by some sort of door feature, like a barn door or something, but it'd make it a distinctive place of business. So we're also proposing some commercial space in the clubhouse that's dedicated to business owners, where they would have their own offices there dedicated. We may even do a reception area and conference room, that sort of thing. So as far as amenities, we're going to step this one up a little bit, even from where we are, our first phase. I know the city has plans to program the lake area with a walking path and some other things, and there's some exciting tenants that may also locate there. We understand from Mr. Allen. We think that's going to create a destination for people to come and walk and enjoy the other businesses there. So we're going to program the back of our property to include that, and we will bring the fence back and allow folks to really use that little space there, whether we do picnic tables or some exercise or pet facility, something like that, but just something that ties them in to the community. We will design it distinctively different than phase one, but it'll blend in, so it's not going to stand out. It looks like just 2 competing, different-looking properties. So we're very cognizant of that. And then the last thing I'd say is all the amenities will be stepped up just a little bit. So the area around the pool and the amenity, the lawn, and kind of what we do there, we'll do some different things. And the last thing that I'll say is we will have some attached parking here, as opposed to just the detached parking that we have now, so that folks can pull into their garages and access their units directly. We think there'll be a big demand there. So, so that's kind of the overview. If you haven't seen our first project, come out and take a look at it. Rent a unit while they're still available, because they're going really fast. So I appreciate your time, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
How many of the live-work units are you going to have?
There's going to be 4 plus probably 5 or 6 office spaces in the clubhouse, separate.
Okay, so it's 4 out of a 300 unit.
Yes. Yeah. I will say, that sounds like a small number, but we are very cautious when we do these, and I can tell you that in a lot of cities, this concept, while it sounds really good, has not worked as well when there's too many. And what I've seen is that these spaces become converted into loft apartments because there's too many. It's a more finite demand than you might imagine. That's been our experience. But I think with the 5 to 6, 7 offices within the clubhouse and the 4 spaces, that can accommodate 10 separate businesses, which we think is a pretty good mix, a pretty good number, rather. No, not yet. Not yet. No, we haven't. We haven't even advertised Phase 2. I think at this number, they'll go fairly quickly with the tenant base that we expect. From a timing standpoint, we would hope to get started and break ground by the end of the year. Yep, yep. Yeah, good question. I suspect that there'll be a portion that folks will want to commit to and do 6-month leases, and then the others would be available to lease for shorter periods of time. That's been our experience in other markets.
Any other questions for this gentleman? All right, thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this request? No? All right. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in opposition to this request? No? Then I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, any questions?
Just got one comment.
Yes, sir.
Several weeks ago, we had a group that came out and presented about the shops at Terrell. They came out there, everything that they presented was very vague. It wasn't very specific. I want to say to the developers here, thank you for coming in with hardcore stuff. I mean, the stuff we had the last time was almost an insult to us as a commission. We appreciate you coming in and bringing in solid work. This is something that you got a plan, whereas they just came in with an idea. So I want to say thank you for that.
All right. All right. Any other questions or discussion? Then I will entertain a motion, please.
I motion agenda item 5.4, plan development, Crossroad at Terrell, Phase 3B, Lot 1, being 11.451 acres, PD 21-03 be approved.
I have a recommendation, I have a motion, excuse me, to recommend to the city council to approve this zoning change that's requested. Do I hear a second? I have a second, a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. This has carried. All right, item number 5.5. Conduct a public hearing to discuss and consider a request to amend a specific use permit to allow Platinum Chevrolet Cadillac to operate an auto dealership on a property currently zoned as retail, amending to include additional 11.834 acres to allow for the construction of a freestanding auto dealership to be built similar to the adjacent Chevrolet and Cadillac dealerships and parking lots. The property is located generally west of FM 148, being 11.834 acres of land conveyed to Terrell, into Terrell 8020 Limited, as recorded in deed of records of Kaufman County, and being in the John C. Hale Survey, A202, City of Terrell, Kaufman County, Texas, SUP 20-01, passed on July 2020, ordinance number 2841. Mr. Fenner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Ms. Amira, can you go to the site plan? One more. Where'd it go? I'm just trying to get you oriented. Right there. So, I don't know what page it's on. So here is where we're at. The Crossroads, they had presented an application in 2020 for an SUP because in retail, we require an SUP for auto dealerships, new auto dealerships. This area was down further west of Academy and Olive Garden and so forth. And as you know, we've dealt with the Gilchrist family building the Ford and dealership, Ford and Dodge dealership across the street, and redevelop that area. And they had purchased out Mr. Murray for this Chevrolet and the Buick. When they first came looking, they took this property, and it's on, if you look at that, it's on the right. That property was first brought in as a 14-acre tract, and all we did then was we created a SUP overlay and a site plan for that property for them to use it as an auto dealership. Basically, essentially the same thing that they're doing over at the Ford and Dodge dealership. There's been nothing done on the lot at this point, but we did create that, and obviously negotiations. There was talk when we were looking at when we were in our development meetings with some property owners that would try to sell to Charlie Gilchrist, and they want so much money and go back and forth, and we'd talk about certain sites and this and that, and then this site came up, which is additional approximately 12 acres over west of there. And this would be the area for the Cadillac site. So when we did the site for the Chevy dealership, I don't know if you remember, but I did some extra standards in there. All the blue, we put perimeter landscaping around the whole the whole property to make it look really cool, because we understand that they don't like to have a lot of trees within their parking lot for parking, and so we just wanted to upgrade that and create quality is what we always want to do. We also created an option for them in their front entry feature to have a waterfall feature or a huge flag, because we like flags, the American flag. We wanted a 500 square foot flag, and they kind of got a little crazy about that in our last meeting when they were looking at this west side, and I said, well, we're going to get a flag because this is the entryway into Terrell, and you guys are car dealerships, and you can do a good job with that. So what we decided to do, and part of the reason why your packets were late, is that we've been trying to get in information from their architect who is somewhat confused, because we did change our standards on our SUP, because essentially what we've done is we've taken the standards from this 14-acre tract and we've included the 12-acre tract into the SUP, and it's basically considered an amendment to the SUP that we have now. So that's what you're looking at right at this point. All this is a zoning overlay for retail. There'll be 2 entrances. It'll be approximately 26 acres, and then we'll have language, obviously, in the ordinance, which creates the SUP. Some things that we need to look at are the landscaping requirements, the building facade requirements, the front entry features, the perimeter screening, the 10-foot landscape buffers, and so forth. And really the big deal on this is, yes, we are going to have perimeter landscaping. We require landscape buffer up against roads, okay? 10-foot buffer, where you plant a tree every 40 foot and you plant some landscape. Not just grass, but you actually plant some kind of landscape. In this situation, we have here that there will be a 10-foot adjacent buffer, 10-foot adjacent to the right-of-way, to the perimeter of the property, and it shall be naturally attractive, vegetated, irrigated landscape buffer, in which shall contain large trees planted every 40 foot around the perimeter, and other ornamental shrubs and grass and decorative trees too, within the perimeter of that area, which is not always a requirement. So that's a step up for us. In addition to that, we'll have an aesthetically pleasing seasonal flower arrangement in the main entry. So when you pull in there, you'll have one of these big little sections that'll have seasonal flowers. There's a map in here that kind of, you can see that, and it's gonna be something like that. That's where we're gonna get some flag poles, but I don't believe we're gonna get our 500 square foot flag. But they're trying, and they're going to do that on both, they'll have those planters on both sides. Their landscape will be a minimum of, there will be 3-inch caliber, the typical stuff, per 21 spaces, and so we do allow them to not put them, in our landscape ordinance, we have to place them every 10 foot. Well, this is a car dealership. We also have an allowance to place them in other areas if that causes a problem, just like on anything else. If you have a piece of property that has a sharp corner on it and it's hard to get the 10%, we can allow you to put that 10% on a corner, and 10% is really not that much, but they're overdoing, and that's great because we want quality. Detailed landscape plan will be submitted, tabulated, and submitted for a permit. So we'll be reviewing that. The perimeter landscape will meet or exceed the City of Terrell landscape ordinance. I like their language, but that really means exceed. What it says is a modified interior landscape will be submitted for permit too. Landscape area consisting of 3 flag poles, 45 inches tall flower, and a flower bed, island, and/or landscape features, if we can create those. There will be a 10-foot landscape buffer required between parking area and property line, with trees planted every 40 foot. 2 ornamental trees, caliper trees may substitute, 2 ornamental trees may substitute for 1 large tree. Now, the building in this SUP is the big deal, and so we get all this quality, and we get all these these extras that we want, but we also need to look at what their corporate thematic design is, and that's not always brick and stone. And so we're allowing them to build accordingly, and that will be specific due to service dealership facilities. And that will also be the same for their signs as they put those signs up. They'll have approximately 4 signs. They design, well, there was some landscaping stuff that they put in there, but that's okay. But the Cadillac dealership will look a certain way, and you know how dealerships have certain thematic designs that they have to have. I don't know if any of you have been in the Platinum Ford dealership, but it's a pretty good dealership, pretty crazy dealership over there. It's pretty nice. The specific use permit is limited to such automobile sales and service dealership facilities, and that's described accordingly for the property. So, in essence, what we'll have is a 26-acre tract of land that will have these dealerships, the Chevy, the Buick, the Subaru, all that stuff that came with it, and they will be on the west side of the property, and that's where the Allens are wanting to develop this area, and that's where they've negotiated that. The next steps will, of course, be to submit a construction plat that will show their public improvements and what they're doing, and part of that's landscaping, and so we'll have to work with them on all that landscaping. Are they going to put it in? Because as you know, sometimes it's the time of year. They have to irrigate this stuff. We have to work with them on that. And we haven't had many problems with them on the landscaping stuff, or any problems with them on the other side. They know how we work. And then from there, once those public improvements are done, or there's a letter of credit from the owner, the Allens, or the Oakland Development Company, once those things are done, because Crossroads will be extended a certain way down on the southern portion of the property, okay? That's a public improvement, and of course sidewalks and all that, and then the water and sewer. We will have to deal with, on the 14 acres that's additional, there's a transmission line running across there, and that'll take some time to deal with them, with the appropriate authority on that. But everything is pretty common here. They've got their pylon sign that they're gonna have up, and they have their monument sign that they're gonna have up. And staff has met with them several times, and we recommend approval of attaching this 14 acres to the 11 or whatever acres it is, approximately 26 acres for the SUP. So it's essentially the amendment to the current SUP as you have it in your packet. Any questions?
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
So, is this area going to be specifically for sales? I know dealerships have to have a service department, but are we gonna have a body shop out there amidst all this retail and all that usual kind of mess that comes along with a body shop? Is that gonna be included in this project that we know of?
We could, service dealership, and some definitions allow for that. In this case, like the Ford, they have the car wash that's in part of their service delivery service department. So there was no conversation about that.
Do you know of any other car dealerships that's going to be included on this area of this property, Crossroads? Do we have anything else in the future coming up that we know of?
I do not want another car dealership on that property, but I can't control some of it. Now, you can control some of it through the SUP process, but I think it's part of that enhancement of what a real mixed-use development is going to be, and a real destinational piece is going to be. I do know that we've changed. And get some more detail. We've changed. Las Lomas has some property just a little further west, and we have talked to them about how they have entrances. So not just Las Lomas, but the Allens, how they have entrances and how they could stop certain roads and just have certain retail. And we've been a part of those conversations because what we want to do is maximize. We believe that Crossroads still has the opportunity to have a market that would be possibly a couple anchor markets, and so we don't want to waste that. Some of these things up front aren't going to hurt us. As you know, there's restaurants that were plotted up front. We do have some information in from the Texas Roadhouse, and that's the latest one. But there are some other areas that we want to make sure there's good circulation through there, so we can continue with the retail and make sure that we get as much as we possibly can out of it.
Well, I just would hate to see us give away our prime development property, our prime opportunity to develop revenues for the city of Terrell to car dealerships who pay no sales tax revenue on cars they sell.
Well, they do pay some sales tax on parts and other things, but you're right, and we want to make sure that things turn out the right way. So it's just this is not a master plan. This is a retail zoned area, and the market's driving. As you know, we have hotels coming in. We have some other things happening, and that's good for us. On the other side was the same developer, but it's an actual planned development. The market center behind Buc-ee's. We have the new hotel that's there, and we're hoping to have a couple new ones. And as you know, we hope to have the event center on this side of the other side of the apartments and things like that. But I think in looking at the development, we all got to consider individually. We know too is money's money and how we invest. But if you look at the opportunities that are left over, there's a good opportunity for one or two other anchored developed areas that could create a different shopping experience. And we hope to see that. And I think they help see that too. They have to understand too, their repayment, some of the repayment for tax dollars and stuff, the more, the better, so.
Any other questions, discussion? All right, then I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this, this addition, amendment to the SUP? All right, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in opposition to amending this SUP? All right, then I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, you have any questions at all? Discussion? Then I will entertain a motion. I have a motion to recommend City Council approval of amending this specific use permit. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign.
Aye.
All right, that has carried. All right, item number 5.6 is to conduct a public hearing to discuss and consider approval of an ordinance updating the current sign code, section 4.22. Note, ordinance number 2055 adopted March 20, 2021, amended 422 in its entirety to read as herein set out. At the city's request, the sign provisions were left in the chapter, 1324-100 zoning ordinance. Should conflict arise between the zoning ordinance and ordinance number 2055, it is presumed that the more recent provisions will prevail. We would ask you to explain that to us, please, sir.
So basically, what we're doing is keeping everything inside the Code of Ordinances, no separate ordinances. Some cities have separate masonry ordinances, or they'll have separate fence ordinances, or separate all kinds of little ordinances. In this case, the big deal here is antique. This zoning ordinance, and we talked about this at during the comprehensive plan process, because it doesn't just take in the use of the property, the design of the property, the layout of the property, the zoning of the property. It takes in things like zoning and things like building materials and so forth. And you may recall, and some of you very much so close to this, is that signs are economic. You know, there's value to them. We have certain businesses that are destination businesses, and we have certain businesses that people just know where they are. And then we just have things that are just uncontrollable and way uncontrollable, and so we have to have some form of control to make that work. As you know, we made a couple presentations. Our management consultant, Mr. John Godwin, has done a fantastic job. Talked to you a little fast on a couple of meetings about what he was doing and how he was addressing it. But we did have some specifics in there, and part of the implementation program on that comp plan was we needed to change some of our ordinances, some of those ordinances that were outdated, and this is just like anything else. And so I'm going to bring him up, and we'll go through it. He'll have a little PowerPoint and then go through the ordinance itself.
Thanks, sir. Good evening again. I'm not going to spend as much time as I did the last two times I was here, I promise. I am going to just kind of hit the highlights. If you'd go to that next slide. It'll look a little bit like last month's PowerPoint, but it's not even half as many slides. And I'm only going to talk about the stuff in blue, unless you have questions about the stuff in black. And so this slide is just about the preliminary stuff. A lot of this will be once this is codified, and it's not codified yet by the city attorney, but once you approve it this evening, if you do, the city attorney will be turned over to the city attorney. She'll codify it, put it in the form of an ordinance. And so at the beginning, it'll have all the whereases, and at the bottom, it'll have the enforcement stuff, which I'll talk about a little bit later on too. So this is just the beginning of the stuff. But applicability, it doesn't apply to just everything in the world. Two of the things we've talked about before, those last two, content neutrality and on versus off premise. Those things are based on judicial findings. The political signs are not content neutral. The idea with content neutrality is you can look at a sign, if you can't read or if you don't speak the language, it won't matter how you enforce it. And that's not exactly the way it works, but that's kind of the rule of thumb that the judges use. That case goes back about 10 years ago. And so we talked about this last time too, like the definition of political sign is not even in here anymore. We don't talk about political signs. We have to treat a political sign, whether you're, vote for this person, be against this project, or we're having Bible school on June 14th. They all have to be treated the same way. And then on versus off premise, that's a much more recent case, maybe 6 months ago, sometime in 2020. And we were talking about this a little bit ago. Austin's appealing that now, so it might get changed. But they're kind of doing the same thing with off premises versus on premises. The decision in that court case was that if a sign meets all of your other standards, whether it's a person's business or whether it's down the street somewhere, it shouldn't matter as far as these are constitutionality issues. So that's why those are like that. Any questions about any of that? Okay, next slide. And then there's a big group called general regulations, and I'll just hit the highlights of those. In 5 basic categories, just the general stuff, general part of general, and where you can put them, content neutrality again. Then there's electrical signs, and of course you have to be safe. You have to follow the electrical code. You have to do those kinds of things. Those kind of common sense things that people sometimes don't do if you don't have ordinances. They have to be safe and sound. They can't block the view of traffic. They can't block the view of people walking down the street. They can't pretend like they're stop signs and cause traffic issues, stuff like that. You can't have flashing lights. You can't have moving things. You can't have loud noises. You can't have spotlights. You can't have, not spotlights, you can't have spotlights in certain cases. You can't have strobe lights, stuff like that. Construction, you have to follow the building codes. One of the big parts of that for signs, especially with signs get big, is wind load. You don't want a sign whipping down the road and hitting people. So you have to do that. You have to have quality stuff. And, you're getting some quality development, and you want to have quality signs to match up with that. And then maintenance, you have to take care of. You have to govern not just what they build, but they have to keep it maintained. They have to keep it looking good forever, not just for first. And those two things talk about a little bit, the 10-day notice. If you get bad, then just like any other kind of code case, high weeds or junk car in your front yard, it's a classic thing. You got 10 days to fix the problem. And if they don't, then the code enforcement officers that work for Charles go to the next stage. Any questions on any of those? Okay, Omar? Permitting and review. This is, again, pretty simple, basic stuff. It's just like other kind of permits and reviews that you have in the city. And just skipping to those last two, we talked about those a little bit more than the rest. The others are kind of, I think simple. But non-compliant, unsafe stuff, again, same kind of thing. These are code enforcement. These code enforcement officers are going to enforce the sign code as far as the city staff is concerned. So if there's an unsafe sign or a bad sign, they're going to get a notice. The owner's going to get a notice. The operator's going to get a notice that says you got 10 days to fix that sign. And if it's like super bad, it's going to kill somebody any second now, then the city is authorized to go down and tear it down or secure it immediately and then send them the bill for the work they did. Obsolete signs, you get a little bit longer. You get 60 days to do that. And obsolete signs, like, there's a sign out there for a business that went out of business 3 years ago. It's obsolete, so it has to be removed. And I specifically mentioned that just in case anybody noticed this. Hopefully you didn't, but I'll confess anyway. It talks about obsolete signs in 2 different places in the ordinance that you got last month. And in one place it said 60 and one place it said 90. So I fixed that. So sorry about that. But it looks like nobody caught me anyway, so that's a good thing. Okay, any questions on any of that? Okay, and then the next. Specific sign regulations. These go on and on forever, but not tonight, I hope. I just want to mention in the single family, because these are kind of a little bit of changes, because I'm told, I don't live here, so I don't know the city real well. I'm here, a couple days a week for parts of days. But that there are some issues with single family because historically they've kind of let some stuff happen, maybe before even 2001 or however old the ordinance is that's in place right now. But you can't have lighted signs in neighborhoods. You can't have, we're trying to really push for monument signs, talked about that a couple times before too. No detached signs except for a monument sign that's for the neighborhood. So you can't have a bunch of signs just all over the place. You can't advertise things, you can't have flashing signs, you can't have lighted signs. It needs to look like a neighborhood because people need to live there and be calm and quiet and go to sleep at night. And then temporary signs, there's an exception for temporary signs. There's a whole little section in the ordinance for new developments. When it's under construction, you can put signs up on every so many feet based on how big it is, or so many houses, or so forth and so on. So people can find it, know where it is, and get around. There's construction sign requirements and so forth and so on. And there's also some stuff for multifamily and institutional, which I won't go into. Any questions on any of those or comments?
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
So on the no elimination, so if you had a residential development and there was a little church there that had a lighted sign, is that something that will not be allowed?
There's a special thing for about institutional stuff. And churches, there's a group in there, and honestly, right off the top of my head, I don't know where it is in there, but it talks about institutional, and it's churches, schools, nonprofits, people like that, and so they have a special set of rules for them. Okay, next. That changed, I'm sorry. I was looking at the top, and the top didn't change, the rest of it changed. I was waiting for you to hit it again. Building facades, shopping centers, these two that are in blue here are significant because they give Charles, it's kind of like an SUP sort of thing for signs. So building facades, shopping centers, industrial parks, there's special stuff in there on page 19 where, like well, he's gone, so I'll quit pointing at him. The center down that they're just talking about, the part that's a PD, he can negotiate that. He can say, well, then normally we can't have a 500-foot flag, but because you're a PD, we can negotiate that. And that takes precedent over that. So it gives Charles or whomever else from the staff, city staff, or EDC for that matter, I guess in some cases maybe, they can negotiate things by agreement. That's how PDs work and SUPs work. So that gives Charles an extra tool. Central Business District has specific ratios, and there's also some flexibility there for the staff to negotiate those things. Now again, those things, if it's PD or an SUP, just like tonight, they have to come to you for approval. So staff can't just give those kinds of exceptions, but they can negotiate those and then bring you for a recommendation, and then you'd take it on to the city council. Any questions or comments about those? Okay, and then next. Specific sign regulations, again, highway signs and digital billboards, and I do want to talk about highway signs a little bit more, specifically on page 32. And the reason I want to talk about these, well, let me back up. So highway signs are being treated somewhat differently. So these are two areas I want to talk about specifically in any case. But also, since the time I was here last month, I've got a few changes that I'm going to recommend to you or ask you to consider on pages 32 and 33. Let me jump ahead to digital billboards. Digital billboards, the language there is just, it restricts them. They can't be on between midnight and 6 in the morning, and they have to stay on for at least 10 straight seconds. So they're not doing this with changing messages and making people have wrecks or strokes or seizures or whatever. But back to the highway signs, beginning on page 32, under section M, which is highway signs, there are a few changes that I'll go through, and if you have any questions or comments, or if you agree with them, hopefully, we'll just include those in the motion at the end of the meeting, assuming there's a motion. But number one, it talks about you have to get a permit every year, and you have to pay a fee every year. I'm suggesting that we just change that to just once a year. You get a permit, you pay your fee, and then that's it. You don't have to do it over and over and over and over and over. So that's a correction to that. Also in number one, it talks about only on toll roads or restricted access highways. And so there's a piece of Highway 80 out to the west that I think should be included in this too. And that's basically about Metro and what is it, CR 237 to the north. I think that should be included too. So I've got language in there that includes that as well, if that's making sense. So that highway signs can be on Interstate 20, Highway 80, west of Metro, and they could be on 557. So I've just specifically inserted that chunk of, I don't know, a mile or two of how it's all commercial. It's going to be commercial. We talked about tonight. It's your comprehensive plan calls for it to be highway corridor. So, and then on the same page on page 32 still, the height. I started working on this I think I talked to you guys for the first time. Some of you weren't on here yet. Back in October. But TxDOT's changed I kind of tried to mirror TxDOT on some of this, And so what's in there, what you have now is again on page 32, number 3, is a maximum of 42 and a half feet. But textiles changed that, so I'm recommending you change that to 50 feet, make it a little higher. And the big thing there is we don't want to have people that have had signs out there for a long time, all of a sudden their signs they're legal, they'd be legal, but non-conforming. That's a real problem if you own signs or whatever, buildings or businesses or whatever else, but in this case, signs. So we're recommending changing that from 42.5 feet to 50 feet on number 3. And then on number 6, again, same thing, just sticking in that extra piece of Highway 80 on there. So it'll be those same 3 highways again, 80, 557, and I-20. Does that all make sense? I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but is that everybody clear on what we're doing there? Okay, and then on the next page, on page 33, number 9, it talks about, once again, talks about getting a permit every year. Well, you just need to get it once. So I've written new language that we'll include in here and would ask you to include in your motion to do it only once. In that very last sentence on number 9, I'm on the wrong page here, that reads, further, any lot or tract of land on which a non-conforming sign is located shall not be further subdivided until such billboard has been removed. I'd like to take that sentence out. It just seems too harsh to me. The reason some cities do that is because sometimes, having worked for cities since 1986, that's a long time ago, and not 66, no, 86, they just tell city code enforcement officers too bad. And so sometimes you stick a little extra, whack them with a stick, or like this would be a really big stick. Not only are you gonna have to fix your sign, but we're not even gonna let whoever owns that subdivide the property. I think that's onerous. And if y'all wanna leave it in, that's okay. But I recommend taking that sentence out, even though I'm the one that put it in there to begin with. Any questions on those? Yes, sir. Right. Yeah, you get it just like you building a house or something else. You pay your fee and you get it inspected and you get your permit. That's right. That's right. Unless there's a reason, you always have a right to do that if there's a danger, if there's a problem, if there's something broken, just like any other kind of code enforcement case. But again, that's just like, you got somebody out there that's got a good sign. Why are you taking your time and their time? And frankly, it's one of those things that it gets at the bottom. I don't know about code enforcement here, but in most cases, it gets on the bottom of code enforcement's list anyway. Like, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. They'll usually have to take time to send you the bill for it, but they don't necessarily have time to go out and inspections. It just makes more sense. Charles is different from that, but most other cities are not that good. It's one of those nitpicky things that makes people hate government in a lot of cases, and so I just think it's not necessary. They'll know. You'll know if a sign's falling apart. I mean, people will tell you. Their code enforcement officers are out in the field on a daily basis or close to it, if not every day. So they're going to know. Yeah. So do it on a case-by-case basis. Anything else on that page, or that section, M? Okay. And then moving along down to the next slide, Omara. Prohibited non-conforming signs. And I want to talk about specifically, jumping down to pages 36 and 37, non-conforming. And non-conforming signs, this kind of what I mentioned this kind of in passing a little bit already. Non-conforming can mean it's illegal or it can mean it's not legal. So it's not necessarily one or the other. And y'all probably all know this, but just to review, you've got a sign, well, I'll make it about zoning just for fun. You've got a barber shop, and you've had a barber shop there for 20 years, and it's zoned for barber shops. And then a new comprehensive plan comes along, and they say, well, no, you can't have barber shops anymore. You have to have houses. Well, your barber shop's not illegal. It's just a legal non-conforming use. Same thing with signs. They can be legal non-conforming uses. So there may be some signs that will become non-conforming as a result of this new ordinance being passed. Maybe somebody's got a 53-foot sign, you approve 50 feet, oh, it's 3 feet too. Well, we're not gonna make them cut 3 feet off or move it or tear it down. It's perfectly legal. But you have to have some things in place so that it doesn't stay non-conforming for a million years. And so typically you do things like, well, when you change if it's a business, when they change businesses, when it goes from a barber shop to a grocery store, okay, you don't get to grandfather that because that's not what you had. If you change ownership, a lot of times you do that. There's just a lot of little keys, little triggers the ordinances typically have to say, okay, now it's time for you to come into compliance with the new ordinance, whatever that new ordinance is. Signs are a little more difficult because the sign is usually going to be used as a sign as opposed to a barber shop turned into a grocery store or something else. And so we've got some stuff in there, and this is in Section 8, prohibited signs. On page 35, this will sound familiar to you again. On page 35, number 20, so about 3/4 ways down the page. Again, I got that extra piece of US 80 in there. Y'all follow me on that? Number 20, down in the blue. Same thing as just in those two other places too. Not just the piece of 80 that's on the west of the 557, but that piece between Metro and over. And then on the next page, on page 36, all the way at the bottom of the page, number 9, and this goes to really more what I'm talking about there. Signs are different from barber shops or buildings. And so I've got all those little triggers, A through E. Those are kind of the common triggers that people have for buildings. Especially in the case of highway signs, because highway signs are very often not on your property. If you have a barber shop, that sign up front is probably your sign. But billboards or highway signs, as we're calling them now with all the new legal stuff, they're not usually on that person's property. So that's a separate kind of a business. And so I think this A through E doesn't apply to that, or at least it doesn't very readily. If you've got a big sign out there on that piece of Highway 80 we're talking about, and the guy who owns the land changes his business, well, it shouldn't affect you because you've still got the sign. You still should have a legal non-conforming use. So all I'm recommending there on number 9 is just inserting 4 words. So at the very first beginning, it reads, all existing non-conforming signs other than highway signs located on any land parcel. And everything else stays the same. So it just makes it. We could argue that we should leave it in, parts of those in for highway signs, but I just think just take highway signs out of this completely. There's other ways highway signs, lots of other ways in here that highway signs are going to be addressed in any case. Is that okay? Does that make sense? Okay. And then, next slide. I want to talk about these just kind of specifically to there's different ways you can do this. You need to have a board of appeals of some sort. Most cities use an existing board of appeals. And in this case, I'm recommending you use your ZBA or BOA, whichever one y'all call it. Everybody calls it different things, but it's the zoning board of adjustment. It could be you. It could be you could create a sign board. I've worked for a city that created their own sign board, but they sometimes are just looking for something to do. I don't recommend that. So that's what I'm recommending, but just want to be clear about that. You don't have to, you go a different model if you want to. If you think, well, gee, we want to be the sign board, you could recommend that too. The purpose of that is we usually just think about the third thing, variances. The board of adjustment, and it's just adjustment, by the way, not adjustments like everybody usually says. I hope you don't say it wrong. But they also have, you can appeal staff decisions. So if Charles is, jackbooted thugs from code enforcement go out there and say, hey, this sign is wrong, then the guy says, that's not what the ordinance says. That's not what Godwin wrote. And he can appeal it to this group, and then they'll decide whether Charles's people are right or not. And then grant exceptions, one-time exceptions because there's something going on. Exceptions are a little bit different from variances, and I won't go into the details of that. And then variances, and I'm sure you're very familiar with variances, have to be specific circumstances required and so forth and so on. So any questions about that, or do y'all want to talk about if you agree with the ZBA doing it, or you want to talk about somebody else doing it, or that's common, but it's not the way it's on. It can be done other ways. Do you have any preferences?
Let them do it.
Okay.
Who makes that decision? Who does?
Well, you're gonna make a recommendation to the city council, and it's in there right now. It says ZBA. So when you make a motion to approve, unless you change it, that's what's going to go to council, and I feel confident they won't change it unless you ask them to, and they might not even then. So, okay, and then the next slide is not there. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about too, in case the very last page, page 38, and that's under violations. I kind of hinted at this just a little bit, but when you read that, and I will just a little bit because it sounds really heinous or horrific or something, and it's because people that work in code enforcement want every little tool they can get because you don't have code enforcement officers out there, and you don't have ordinances even written for people that behave and take care of their property. It's for the people that don't. And so that A there, we're trying to name everybody that maybe is at fault. Because if you only name one person that's at fault, and it's the other person, it's the other guy that did it, then you can't take it, it's like, well, I'm not mentioned in the ordinance, it's the other guy. And so, so it looks like, if you're not familiar, and I don't want to insult anybody, if you're not familiar with how that process works, these are municipal court things. If it goes to court, the code enforcement officers will go to the prosecuting attorney. It'll go to municipal court, the municipal judge will hear it. Now at the police station, I was gonna say it used to be in here, but not anymore. So it says the owner or lessor of the sign, the lessee of the sign, the owner of the land, or the owner of the structure where the sign's located, and/or the person responsible for putting the sign up. Maybe it could be some guy that put a sign up 3 years ago. So it looks like we're gonna hit all those people. That's not how it would really work. We would just pick one of those people that we think is, you're gonna know, you're the guy that takes care of the sign, so you need to fix it. So that just gives code enforcement the opportunity to go through that. And then under D, there's the deal that, and this is very typical too, $200 fine for each and every offense, and it can even be done day by day. And that's standard language too. I've only seen people get fined once in my million years. Thank you very much, 1966. Where the judge and the district, or not district attorney, the city attorney prosecuting attorney got so angry that they literally were finding somebody $200 every day, day after day after day. That's just rare. It's really very recalcitrant, uncooperative people that aren't even trying, that they're gonna do that with. You just like to have it in there because sometimes a judge can scare people with it. Now, with all of that said, if you want to recommend changes to that, you certainly can. I don't recommend it. But the city attorney, like I was talking about earlier, when she codifies this, when she changes this into an ordinance, that first piece I didn't really talk about, there's going to be a bunch of whereases, whereas this, whereas that, the purpose and stuff like that. And then this section 12 down here, she's going to write that like she writes all of her ordinances anyway, unless she gets specific direction from the city council to do otherwise. So if you want to talk about that or change that for something to make it sound a little softer, I understand, and we can talk about that. But that's the reason it's written like that. It's the worst case scenario to give the staff, and specifically the city attorney, or not the city attorney, the prosecuting attorney, and the municipal judge, all the tools they can have. But ultimately, Mary Hill Ramsey, the city attorney, is going to write that how she thinks she needs to write it, unless she's told differently.
So she will review.
Yes, sir.
This and rewrite it sensibly.
Absolutely. In fact, and and I know that's a little bit of a concern for you because it seems like a beating, and I get that. It's certainly okay to put that in the motion to specifically say, and make sure the city attorney looks at that. You can put that stuff in a motion too. So that's all the presentation I've got. Any questions you have or concerns you have or anything else? And that's all I got. No, I did. Yeah, well, you were gone. It's all good. No, we're all good. Yeah, I think we're good. I don't want you, it's a big ordinance. So on the one hand, it's like, gee, I don't want to talk about all 38 pages, and I put it in 8.9-point font in case you didn't notice it's really small too, or it would have been a lot more pages. But I don't want you to feel like you don't feel comfortable with it either, because it's a big deal. But we've worked on it for months, both staff and different places, and of course met with you guys in council back in the fall, just kind of introducing it. So anything?
Questions for Mr. Godwin? Discussion? All right, thank you, sir.
Just to be clear, because I put this extra, my recommendation to you, this is up to you obviously, my recommendation to you is to recommend approval to council with those changes I suggested, and then whatever language you may or may not want to address to the city attorney as well. Thank you. And I have those written down for you all,
All right, any question or discussion among ourselves, commissioners? No? Then I will open a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in favor of adopting this sign ordinance? No? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in opposition of accepting this sign ordinance, adopting it? No? Then we will close the public hearing. All right, so if there's no questions, no discussions, if you, commissioners, if one of you decides to make a motion, whichever way, if you decide to deny, that's fine. If you decide to recommend approval, then I would recommend to you that you at least include in your motion that that the sign ordinance be adopted with the changes that have been made. It's not on our script right now. And that also possibly that the city attorney take a good close look at section number 12, which is the violations, or any other legalese thing that would give the city difficulty come back. I mean, you're a wise bunch, and you know what we need. So why don't, if anybody has a motion, I will entertain a motion at this time. Okay. I have a motion. I believe what Trini has said is that he recommends, a recommendation of approval to the city council with the changes, offered here by Mr. Godwin. And is that correct? And, the city attorney to peruse our, section number 12 along with the rest of the ordinance to be sure that we're legally where we should be. Does that sound right? All right, I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
I have a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. This has carried. Now the authority invested in me. I'm not gonna marry anybody, but I am gonna allow us to be adjourned. How about that?